The science behind why some people have a harder time getting married than others. Coming up now on Solving Jewish Singleness with the therapist that gets it, Liz Wallenstein. So is there a difference between you and the person who kind of quickly got married in their 20s? Science says that there could be. So a theory that it's been around for a long time, but it's actually been getting a lot of steam lately, becoming just very popular, is attachment theory. And it's basically the science of why we're attracted to certain people over others. What about us makes us interested in some people and not others, and the quality of our relationships, kind of like what we could expect based on this relationship type that we've developed. So your attachment style is actually based on the dynamic between you and your primary caregiver. So your parent or whoever was considered your primary caregiver, certain qualities about that relationship. So there are 4 types, and basically the people who tend to get married the easiest and the quickest are the ones that have a secure attachment. So a secure attachment comes from that as a baby, your parent or that caregiver was basically in touch with your needs at least half the time. They were pretty in tune with what you needed, and they were available to give it to you. And this helps the baby develop into an independent, well-functioning adult. So those people who tend to kind of ease through life, they basically trust that life is fair, they have power over their own life, things relatively turn out well. Those are people that tend to have a secure attachment. Now, one of the reasons why secures develop relationships fairly quickly or easily is that they look for somebody that they enjoy rather than need. So other types might be more wrapped up in what they need based on what they're missing, but a secure feels pretty kind of full and enough on their own that they're just looking for somebody that they enjoy. They are able to match with a greater amount of people because they require less from the person and the relationship. So it just lends itself for an easier match up. One of the reasons why it's harder to get married later in life is because the secures have already matched up, and there's not as many around and available as you start to get older. However, some of the science that I read put secures at 50% of the population, but that's a little bit old information, and I would imagine that it's less than that now. So lucky for you if you're secure, but it's not most people these days. So everybody else falls into 3 other types that are called the insecure attachment types. So the first one that we can go into is the anxious attachment. So for the anxious baby, their parent or primary caregiver was in tune with their needs sometimes and not others. There was an inconsistency in the attunements between the caregiver and the child, or they could have been good at addressing certain needs and not others, but there was an inconsistency there. And the baby develops and kind of carries with it into adulthood this anxiety because they're not sure if their needs will get met. So as adults, people with an anxious attachment tend to have this preoccupation with, am I okay? And they're often kind of scanning the responses of others to see if they are being approved of or accepted. They tend to get stuck in their heads. In relationships, having an anxious attachment can a lot of times lead that person to need a lot of reassurance from their partner. So where it starts to develop into problems, what creates obstacles for them in relationships, is sometimes that constant need for reassurance can make them come off as clingy or obsessive, or create drama or feel kind of heavy for the other partner, when that, anxiety can go too far. Another type is the avoidant attachment. So with avoidance attachment, the parent or the caregiver missed most of the needs. There was a lack of attunement between the parent and the child, or they resented the child for having needs. Now, for any of these attachment styles, it's not about the parent, again, being a good or bad parent. These things are complicated. Nobody's perfect. It can have, the attachment style for the parent, for the adult, comes from, well, first of all, it can come from how they grew up, the attachment that they were used to. It could come from their own, flaws and personality dynamics and issues, because we all have them. It could also happen because of the circumstances of that time. So let's say, it's a second child and it comes soon after the first child, and the parent is overwhelmed still with the needs of the first child. So there's less of themselves to give to that second child. So that second child could develop even more of an insecure attachment than, let's say, that first child did. So it has to do with who the parent is, what they're bringing into it, but also the circumstances at the time that the baby was born into. So for the avoidance, unfortunately, there's this misattunement, and the baby kind of develops this, I don't need you anyway mentality that they carry with them into adulthood. And it's kind of like this defense against, you're probably going to disappoint me, you're probably not going to be there for me anyway. So this is how they kind of protect themselves against that rejection. So a lot of times as adults, avoidance can present as disconnected or numb or aloof. They care a lot about their independence and maintaining distance. But, a funny part is as big as they can be about their independence and having their space and things like that, there's also a side of them, there's a real interest in a relationship, and there's a real kind of yearning or curiosity about intimacy. So it kind of lends itself to this hot-cold dynamic. So somebody with an avoidant attachment could be all in one day and feel like super into you and wanting this, and then the next day feel really distant and cold and uninterested. They can kind of switch between those two, because those two sides of themselves, that like primary attachment of like, I don't need you, but then moments of connecting with that side, like, yeah, I kind of do need you, I kind of do want you, could lead to that hot, cold dynamic. And then the fourth and final type, and it's the type like the smallest, that has least amount of people, would be the disorganized attachment. And disorganized attachment usually happens amongst people who were abused, whether that abuse was physical or emotional, because basically a child has a biological need to go to the parents for safety and security. But the disorganized child also has many experiences of feeling afraid or threatened or, abused when they've turned to the parent with their need in the past. So they end up with this go forth, stay back kind of dynamic inside of like, I want to go to you, I need to go to you, but I can't go to you, it's dangerous to go to you. So they get kind of trapped between this go forward, go back place, and it causes their senses to become overwhelmed and kind of a freeze response. So as an adult, they lack a certain presence, a certain peace in order to be in a healthy relationship, maintain a healthy relationship. Now, like I said before, attachment theory has gotten pretty popular these days, but in like the pop psychology world, they kind of, everybody loves a quiz to see their type and say, hey, you're this type. It's not usually that black and white though. We really have aspects of all four within ourselves, but usually with one predominant type. And it can actually act as a continuum. You can move up and down within your type, but also the sides that come out of you have a lot to do with who your partner is. Who are you with? Are you with somebody that we would say like activates your attachment response? So that clinginess if you're the anxious, or that aloofness, let's say, if you're the avoidant. Or does that partner have the ability to kind of relax that response, and because they're just accepting with it, they know how to work well with it, they just don't have that ability to trigger it as much in you. And the reason why that's important is there's this really kind of common dynamic that happens that could be very problematic, and that is that people with the insecure attachments tend to become attracted to one another and not to the secures. And especially avoidance and anxious are usually attracted to one another. So you could imagine what that turns out when you have somebody who needs constant reassurance and then somebody else who could be hot and cold and needs a lot of independence. That could be pretty explosive. Well, highs and lows. You could have it, feel really attached, then feel really unattached, on and off. And the reason for this is, because this is kind of coming from unresolved issues, the person with the insecure attachment can mistake the highs and lows of that dynamic for love. They actually think that that's what love feels like. And so when they have the high lows and the drama of being with somebody else who's insecure, they think like, okay, I'm in love. This is what love is. And they're not attracted to the secure types because we said, like, secures, they're pretty even keel. They're good. They don't have anything to prove. They don't have anything to get reactive about. So the stability, the consistency, the reliability of the secure relationship could be unattractive, could feel boring actually to somebody who has an insecure attachment. So the problem is that the secures, who might be able to be that person that can accept your attachment and not have a problem with it and help you kind of relax it, is not getting into relationships with the people that they can do that with, because those people aren't interested in them. And instead they keep turning to each other, where they trigger each other's attachment styles instead of calm them. So how do you fix this? Are you, basically the question is, are you doomed if you're an insecure attachment? Does this mean that you'll always have prolonged singleness? You'll always have these kind of complicated relationships. You won't be able to secure a stable, healthy, peaceful relationship? No, it shouldn't be that way. But you do have to take responsibility for your type. You have to know your type, and you have to know how to work with it. So you have to know your type, see when it's being activated, and then know how to respond when it is. So let's say for the person with the anxious attachment, they need soothing techniques. They need that when they feel themselves like going to that activated place, that obsessive kind of anxious place, let's say they use techniques like mindfulness or deep breathing, anything like that that helps kind of either calm the anxiety, bring that person down, or get them out of their head. That's why I say mindfulness. That can be very soothing to the type and help them to have more of a secure response rather than an anxious response. For the avoidant, it's about feeling the safety to experience their emotions, to feel less threatened and triggered by their emotions, and kind of relax their defenses that go up to protect their emotions. And so one of the ways of becoming more in touch with your emotions is through going into the body. It's another way also gets you out of your head and more kind of into your core, your gut, but into the body. And so the way that you do that is you kind of check in with your body, look for a sensation, usually very subtle, and just kind of get curious about that sensation to see what emotion it represents. But another good things for avoidance could be therapy, because chances are that these dynamics will also come out with your therapist, because that also could be an intimate relationship. This is also somebody who's trying to get close to you and be there for you and align with you, and so it could trigger kind of the same responses. But the advantage of it happening in the therapy room is that then you can look at it with the therapist. The therapist can be like, hey, what's going on here? And kind of break it down with you, and you can learn from it that way. And then for the person with the disorganized attachment, they would benefit from trauma therapy. And if the thought of talk therapy just feels too overwhelming, too threatening for them, because remember, this is the type who their senses get overwhelmed and they freeze, there's a trauma therapy called EMDR that's a good alternative to that. And that could help you hopefully to become more present, become less afraid, and then more available for relationships. So in conclusion, there's no need to judge your attachment style or to be afraid of it. People with insecure attachments can get married too, but the work is to identify your type and then take responsibility for it, and work to, remember I said before, it happens on a continuum, so work to become more secure. Catch when you get triggered, respond the way that I talked about before, so that you can become increasingly more secure, gain more of a secure attachment. And that's what I've seen happen with a lot of people who do eventually get married, is that they did the work, and not only do they choose somebody who can work well with what their attachment style is and kind of helps them to relax it rather than trigger it, but they also just became more secure themselves through their work. I also, if you want to know more about this and help with identifying what your attachment type is and what you can do about it, I have a book recommendation written over here. It's hard for me to remember the full title, but the book that I recommend is Attached: The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love, by Dr. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. Check it out on Amazon. You'll see it's very well reviewed. But it's a really great book, I think. You know, there's attachment stuff out there a lot for married couples too, but I like this one for singles a lot, in terms of identifying your style and how to work with it. So I hope this was helpful, and good luck. If you thought this recording was helpful, please share it on social media so that it gets to more people that it can help. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. If you're interested in therapy sessions with me online, please contact me through my website or my email or social media. Feel free to send me questions and suggestions of what you'd like to hear me talk about through social media or my website, LizWallensteinTherapy.com. Best of luck to you on your journey. I hope to hear good news soon.